Everyone had a seat at the Christmas table, except me. Even my brother who'd stolen from me sat laughing with a plate full of food. They told me to eat in the garage like a stray dog. But I didn't cry. I simply said, "Check under your plate," and walked out. Ethan stood still for a moment at the threshold, the cold air nipping at his neck while warmth and voices spilled from inside. Snowflakes clung to his coat and hair as he steadied the stack of gifts in his arms. The house looked just the same, glowing with Christmas lights, familiar smells wafting from the kitchen, laughter tucked between clinks of silverware. But something in him knew this would be different. He stepped in quietly. No one turned. His family was already at the dining table, mid-toast, mid-laughter. His mother caught sight of him, her expression not quite surprise, more like discomfort wearing a smile. "Oh," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. "We didn't know you were coming." "I said I'd be here," Ethan replied, his voice soft, careful. "Well, there's no seat left," she said quickly. "You can eat in the garage. We set a space up for you there." Brian snorted, not even looking up from his plate. "Why would we waste a seat on you?" Ethan stood still, blinking once, then again. The lights seemed too bright all of a sudden, the room humming with a cheer that didn't reach him. He glanced around, his father pretending to be busy with his napkin, his sister avoiding his eyes. Only his niece gave him a little wave before her mother nudged her arm down. He shifted the bag of gifts to one hand, then walked slowly toward Brian. Not rushed. Not angry. Just quiet, like a wave that doesn't crash but pulls. He placed the bag gently on the floor beside Brian's chair, then looked him in the eye. "Check under your plate." Brian frowned, confused. He lifted his plate, and there, folded neatly beneath, was a letter. Without another word, Ethan turned, walked back toward the door, and stepped outside, back into the falling snow. Brian sat stiffly in his chair, the laughter drained from his face. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, just paper, and yet his fingers trembled as he peeled it away from the underside of the plate. His hands, always so sure, now seemed foreign. He glanced up, meeting no one's gaze. The clinking of forks had stopped. The room was suddenly too quiet. He opened the flap slowly, as if bracing for a blow. Inside were neatly printed screenshots, lined in precise rows like damning evidence in a courtroom. Bank statements, credit card charges, gambling sites, transaction dates, thousands missing week after week, loans taken under false names, some in his father's, some in his sister's. A cold sweat broke across his forehead. His mother leaned closer, squinting. Her face fell. Her hand went to her chest. "What is that?" his father asked, already knowing. Brian couldn't answer. His lips parted but no sound came. He felt like a child again, caught red-handed, but there was no scolding voice now, just the weight of truth unraveling everything. Across the room, Ethan was already walking away. No accusation, no raised voice. Just that unbearable silence, the kind that doesn't need volume to be loud. He opened the door gently, the wind fluttering in like a whisper, lifting the edge of a ribbon on one of the forgotten gifts by the tree. Brian turned to watch him go, something crumbling inside him. Not rage. Not shame. Something deeper. Regret, maybe. Or the echo of 1,000 second chances he'd thrown away. The door clicked shut behind Ethan. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the family sat frozen, not from the cold, but from the realization that something had broken, quietly and completely. The windshield wipers brushed gently back and forth, pushing snowflakes aside like slow, tired hands. Ethan drove without any real destination, the soft hum of the tires on wet asphalt the only sound for a while. Christmas lights blurred past, reds, greens, golds, glowing warmly in windows, twinkling across rooftops, strung around bare trees like small hopes in the cold. He didn't feel them. Not really. His voice, when it came, was low, more thought than speech. "I used to tell myself that family means showing up. That love meant sacrifice. So I did. I paid Brian's rent when he got fired the third time. Covered his groceries. Helped with the girls' school books, dance lessons, that field trip to Chicago. He slowed at a red light, eyes scanning the families crossing the street, bundled children tugging at mittened hands, parents laughing, whole in a way that felt foreign now. I said no to vacations so I could send him money. Skipped weekends away, passed on dates, told myself I had time later. Later, when he got back on his feet. When they'd see I was holding us all together. The light changed. He drove on, past a church with glowing windows and a choir singing faintly inside. The melody didn't reach him. But today, his grip on the wheel tightened. Not in anger, just to steady himself. Today I stood in that room and realized none of it mattered. Not the help. Not the loyalty. I wasn't a brother. I wasn't a son. I was just useful. Until I wasn't. He exhaled slowly, fogging the windshield for a second. They gave me the garage. Like a delivery driver. Like someone who didn't belong. The snow fell heavier now, quiet and constant. And Ethan just kept driving deeper into the night, trying to remember when love had started to feel like obligation, and why he had let it. The morning light crept in reluctantly through the half-closed blinds, washing the room in pale gray. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, still in yesterday's clothes. His phone buzzed again on the nightstand, rattling softly like a breath held too long. He didn't pick it up. The screen lit up, missed call, 3. Below that, a string of others. Did. Brian. Voicemails. So many voicemails. He scrolled through them slowly, almost absently, like flipping through a photo album of disappointments. His thumb hovered, then tapped one. His mother's voice filled the silence. Honey, we didn't mean what happened yesterday. Your father was just confused. And Brian was upset. You know how he gets when things are tense. It was Christmas. We weren't thinking. Just come home, okay? Let's talk. Her voice cracked at the end, but Ethan only stared at the floor. His hand clenched slightly, not in anger, but to keep the ache in his chest from spilling over. He whispered, barely audible, he wasn't upset. He was entitled. And that was the difference. That was the part they never saw. Brian didn't lash out because he was hurt. He lashed out because he expected to be forgiven. Expected Ethan to stay quiet. To stay small. To keep giving without question. The next voicemail was from his father. Short, stiff. Call your mother back. She's upset. Then Brian's voice. Laughing awkwardly. Guess you showed me, huh? Real dramatic, man. Look, just come by later. We'll figure it out. Ethan pressed the lock button. The screen went black. He stood slowly, walking to the window. Snow still blanketed the street below, but it looked cleaner now, undisturbed. Peaceful. For the first time in years, maybe, he felt a strange kind of clarity, sharp and quiet and painful. Some things don't need to be fixed, he thought. Some things need to be left behind. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the old wall clock, the same one Ethan had taken from his childhood bedroom when he moved out, back when he thought distance could redraw the lines that had always been crooked. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a shoebox open beside him. Inside, scattered and fading, were pieces of his own past. Photos, cards, small notes written in rushed handwriting. He pulled out a picture of Brian's kids, smiling wide with frosting on their cheeks, birthday hats askew. Ethan remembered that day, how he'd driven across town in the rain just to drop off the cake their parents forgot to pick up. He hadn't stayed for the party. Just smiled, handed it over, and left. Another photo, Brian sitting on a sagging couch, sweaty from lifting furniture. Ethan was behind the camera, sore from the same effort, but not in the frame. He never was. Then a crumpled receipt. A money transfer from years ago. Emergency, Brian had said. Rent short. Car broke down. Ethan hadn't questioned it. He never did. He laid the pieces around him like a quiet ritual. The faces smiling back didn't feel warm anymore. They felt distant. Like memories that belonged to someone else. And then, gently, the truth came. It wasn't generosity, Ethan whispered, his voice catching in his throat. It was dependence. Disguised as love. He had always believed that giving was love. That pouring himself into others was how you proved you mattered. But now he saw it, the pattern, the shape of it. His giving had been a kind of quiet plea. See me. Need me. Keep me. But they hadn't loved him more for it. They'd only grown used to it. And in that stillness, something inside him softened, not broken, but bending toward release. The sky was dimming when Ethan pulled into the driveway, the soft orange of sunset blurring into the cold gray of early winter. He didn't knock. The front door, always left unlocked for family, gave way easily under his hand. Inside, the air was thick, not with the usual scent of roast or pine candles, but something heavier. Guilt. Unease. A silence no one wanted to break. His mother was on the couch, eyes red, clutching a tissue in her lap. His father stood beside the fireplace, arms folded like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Brian leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face twisted into that same lazy grin, the one he'd worn his whole life like a birthright. Ethan didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room, jaw tight, hands trembling slightly at his sides. "Why was I always the joke?" he asked, voice low, steady. "Why did no one ever stop it? Why did silence always mean approval?" His mother sniffled but said nothing. His father shifted his weight, eyes averted. Brian scoffed. "You want a medal for being the family bank?" Ethan's eyes snapped to his brother's. "No," he said. "I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be loved without earning it. I wanted one Christmas where I wasn't an afterthought." Brian opened his mouth to reply, but Ethan cut him off. "I showed up," he continued, voice rising now, not with rage but with decades of buried ache. "Every time. For birthdays. Emergencies. When no one else did. And you mocked me for it. Called me soft. Called me weak. But I was never weak, Brian. I was willing. And none of you ever said thank you." His mother's sob escaped then, sharp and breaking. His father looked down, ashamed. Ethan's voice softened. "I'm not angry because you needed me. I'm angry because you never saw me." And with that, the room finally fell quiet, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence after a storm, when wreckage clears and something honest can begin. Ethan reached into the messenger bag slung across his shoulder, the same one he always brought home, packed with gifts and quiet offerings, and pulled out a folded stack of papers. He laid them gently on the coffee table, as if handling something fragile, sacred even. Receipts. Bank transfers. Airline tickets. PayPal screenshots. Years of giving, of saying yes, of showing up, of covering bills without question, of wiring money at midnight without needing to be asked. "This," Ethan said, voice catching slightly, "is what I've carried for over a decade. Rent payments. Hospital bills. Birthday parties. Christmas bonuses. Your mortgage once, Brian. Do you even remember that?" Brian's eyes narrowed, his arms still crossed, but his bravado had slipped. There was something flickering behind the smirk now, doubt, maybe even shame. Ethan turned to his parents. "You taught me that family means giving. That love means sacrifice. But you never taught Brian to stop taking. You never made him understand the weight of what I was holding. You made me the mule for this family and called it love." His mother began to cry again, not softly this time, but the aching kind, the kind that comes when something you believed in cracks at the foundation. And then the front door opened. Kelly stepped in, clutching her coat, her face pale but steady. The room turned. "I read the texts," she said quietly, her eyes on Brian. "The ones where you called Ethan pathetic for helping us. For helping you. And I realized, you're not just cruel to your brother. You're cruel to everyone who stays." Brian's face broke for a second, a flash of panic. "Kelly, wait. I'm leaving," she said, not raising her voice. "And I'm taking the kids. I won't let them grow up thinking love looks like this." The room felt frozen in time. Ethan stood still, breathing hard, heart raw. He hadn't planned any of this, not the confrontation, not the exposure, not the collapse. But maybe this was what truth looked like. Not clean, not kind, but necessary. He didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of letting go. 2 days passed. The apartment was still. Too still. Ethan sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket though the heater worked fine. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals, coating the city in a deceptive softness. It made everything look peaceful, even the silence inside his home. His phone stayed face down on the counter. No vibrations. No rings. No missed calls. Just stillness. Not even a message from his mother. He thought the quiet would bring relief, and in a way it did. No more being summoned only when things fell apart. No more guilt-laced calls. No more pretending not to notice the eye rolls, the jokes at his expense, the way they always seemed to gather closer after he left the room. But it wasn't the peace he imagined. It wasn't victorious. It wasn't healing. It was hollow. He sipped cold coffee, letting it sit bitter on his tongue. His mind drifted. Christmases passed. Laughter that wasn't always cruel. His dad making pancakes, his mother humming carols off-key. Brian teaching him to ride a bike, back when they were just kids and unkindness hadn't yet become habit. Had he burned his only bridge? The thought came like a whisper, then lodged deeper. He wasn't sure. Maybe the bridge had already been rotting, every splintered board laid down with silence and self-denial, and all he did was stop pretending it could hold weight. But he looked at the gifts still stacked in the corner. Unopened. He had brought them home in a rush after the confrontation, unsure why. Maybe some part of him had hoped they'd call. Apologize. Ask him back. They didn't. He got up slowly, walked over, and began unwrapping the first box. Not to give, but to reclaim. One small thing just for him. And for the first time, it felt like he was learning how to begin again. On the third day, just before dusk, there was a pounding at the door. Sharp, insistent, familiar. Ethan didn't flinch. He had been expecting it, the way one braces for a storm long predicted by still skies. He opened the door slowly. Brian stood there, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, like a man cornered by consequences he didn't believe would ever come. "Can we talk?" Brian muttered, voice laced with urgency. Ethan didn't invite him in. Instead, he stepped out, folder in hand. The air between them was brittle. He held it out. "Here," he said simply. Brian frowned, took the folder, opened it. His eyes darted through the pages, wire transfers, receipts, signed IOUs, timestamps. Tidy, undeniable. At the top, a typed statement. Total, $42,500. Filing for fraud if unpaid within 2 weeks. "You're kidding me," Brian scoffed, voice cracking between laugh and panic. "You're seriously going to do this to your own brother?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I didn't do this." "You did." Brian's face twisted. "I was hurting, man. I had a family, bills. You were just sitting on money like you're better than the rest of us." Ethan's voice was calm. Not angry. Just done. "You told me to eat in the garage." Brian's mouth opened, then closed. He had no response. No witty retort, no smug dismissal. Ethan looked him straight in the eyes. "Now you get to live in the mess you made." Brian stepped back like he'd been slapped. "You're really not gonna help me?" Ethan's reply came softly, but it was the coldest thing he'd ever said. "I already did. Over and over. This is the first time I'm helping myself." Then he turned and closed the door. Final. On the other side, the silence was no longer empty, it was earned. Ethan sat alone at his kitchen table, the soft glow of a small candle flickering gently in the dim room. The quiet was different now, not heavy, not suffocating, but filled with a kind of stillness that felt like the calm after a long storm. The world outside had faded away, leaving only the faint hum of life and the steady beat of his own heart. His phone buzzed softly beside him. He glanced down and saw a message from Kelly. Her words were simple but carried the weight of relief and truth. "Thank you. I couldn't face him alone." Ethan's fingers lingered on the screen for a moment, tracing the words as if they were a lifeline. In that instant, the tangled mess of anger, pain, and disappointment began to untangle in his mind. He realized that what he had thought was a loss, the brother he believed he had, was never really there. What he had been holding on to was an illusion, a shadow shaped by years of silent endurance and misplaced hope. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "Maybe I didn't lose a brother, I finally saw him clearly." A deep breath filled his chest. There was no bitterness left, only a quiet strength growing from the roots of all he had endured. The weight of false loyalty lifted, replaced by something fragile but real: freedom. Ethan reached for a pen and paper, the candlelight casting soft shadows as he wrote slowly, deliberately. Family should never cost you your dignity. He folded the note carefully, a gentle promise to himself, a boundary drawn in the sand, a new beginning etched in quiet resolve. And in the stillness of that evening, with the candle's flame flickering softly, Ethan felt, for the first time in a long while, that he was finally free. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, share your story in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and join our channel where real stories find real voices.